So, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Sharon Whiteman, and it's my great privilege and pleasure to be here with Amina Eastham. And we're going to talk everything Lyme, tick-borne diseases, and Australia today. And we're very lucky to have Amina. She's, from almost the time that I've been involved, which is, over 10 years, Amina has been consistently educating herself about these tick-borne diseases in Australia. So I'll just give you a little bit about her background. She's a naturopath, a medical herbalist, and a nutritionist. With over 15 years of naturopathic clinical experience and 25 years of nutritional practice, Amina successfully treats chronic illnesses like Lyme disease, mold illness, fatigue, depression, hormonal imbalances, skin problems, allergies, and digestive disorders. She is extremely passionate about educating others in naturopathy. She has presented as a keynote speaker to medical doctors and naturopaths at international conferences, medical documentaries, radio seminars, webinars, podcasts, and workshops. Amina is the author of the book Lyme Natural, encompassing naturopathic treatment for Lyme disease, co-infections, mold illness, and stealth infections. She also won the award for Australian Practitioner of the Year, which gives me goosebumps reading that, Amina. Amina is currently finalizing her second book, Chronic Stealth Infections, filling in the missing pieces, and about to start her PhD in viral infections associated with chronic illnesses. Now I've got goosebumps head to toe. How lucky are we to have you in Australia? So, Amina, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you.
It's my pleasure. And I know we plan to do this as part of the May Lyme series, but you had a huge travel experience over those times. So I'm really glad that we can do it here. So, I mean, first of all, let's just go back to a little bit about your background and how you ended up being interested and involved in Lyme and other tick-borne diseases.
So it started, I was working in a medical center with a couple of medical practitioners, doctors, and we were doing a lot of work specializing in chronic fatigue and chronic pain type symptoms. And we just started getting a couple of people that had come and had Lyme disease from South Africa and someone else from Canada, but they'd come over here, and just started sort of treating that and looking into it a bit more. And it just seemed to be, I don't know, it was just like a magnet. It just seemed to be more and more people were coming. And then we found out there were people in Australia that had similar symptoms. And back then, no one was really sort of talking about Lyme or tick-borne infections, or I'd sort of contacted a lot of my colleagues to see if anyone had heard of these things. And so I started really having to do some research, and it just sort of escalated from there, really. And it just, I guess, word of mouth has just, just sort of cascaded the treatments.
And what kind of passion drives you to continue with such a, potentially controversial illness?
Oh, there's so many things. I mean, I think obviously there's a need for it. I just have a calling. I just feel that's what I'm meant to be doing. There's no doubt about that. And it's also to have, just be able to understand it from a naturopathic perspective, and also the medical side of things, and looking at, it's not, you can't just suddenly give a diagnosis, and how that things like Lyme and tick-borne infections will affect the whole body and every system. So it's actually the perfect example of how naturopathy can be helpful in an integrated way, working with doctors as well. So it's just, it's just what I do. And I've always had an interest in biology and biochemistry and how the body works, and particularly the bacterial side of things, viral side of things, because I can see that it's such an underlying issue for so many people, but it's just so undermined. So yeah, it's not fully understood. And I think people generally maybe in the medical industry are not looking at the full picture, actually looking at the person as a whole, and looking at all the things of how these types of pathogens can affect people.
No, absolutely. I know in my time involved in this, I've been sick for 20 years and involved in trying to make a difference with the Lyme Disease Association of Australia for 10 plus years. And even with all the evidence that was on record through multiple roundtables and doctors' meetings and Senate inquiry, things have deteriorated, and they're the worst they've ever been in my experience. So, it's distressing for doctors. It's distressing for patients. What helps you through the challenges, excuse me, of those health policy failures?
I just try, every patient I look at with a really fresh outlook. I just want to, I like to gather all their history and see where they've come from, what's happened, and the whole story. So I don't know, it's just like a clean slate for each person that comes to see me. I want to get all the information, see how it's affecting them now. And yes, sure, they've often gone through so many different challenges. I don't know. I think there are certain doctors that are really helpful to work with, that, we can work together on different things. And just, I don't know, I guess just putting it all together. I have a very positive, optimistic outlook for it. So I like to overcome whatever it is needed. If there's testing that's needed that we can't do through the Medicare services, we'll do it privately. There's always a way of getting through and over the challenges. So I like to just think that let's just do it. Just do the best that we can in the situation that we've got.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And, you've traveled internationally fairly extensively and liaised internationally as well. What do you see as unique about the Australian situation from your perspective?
With regards to Lyme and everything and chronic.
Yeah, chronic. Well, and multi-system illness, really, and some of them triggered by these stealth infections.
Yeah, I think it really depends. I have mixed views, because there are some medical practitioners that are very open and understanding of it all, and willing to work well together with naturopathy in an integrated way. And then there's some very sort of closed, more a little bit more narrow-minded outlooks. So I think, yeah, Australia definitely has its challenges, because it just seems to be completely denied. I mean, other countries, at least like England or Canada or America, at least they recognize it. So it's frustratingly challenging. But I think I try and, sort of rise above that and go, what, like, everybody's not going to be of that mindset, or a bit more open-minded. And it's like I guess there's so much ignorance, which is a sad word to say, but that is the fact. And we just have to overcome that. We just got to keep doing, because you can't just accept that. We just got to keep putting the work. And there are, there's so many political reasons, and there are obvious reasons why I think that, my personal thoughts on why that it's not recognized, and it's not fair. It's not fair. It's actually not humanly fair. But it is what it is. So
not scientific either.
Yeah. It's not.
No, it's not this stance that's currently we're existing under and enduring is definitely not scientifically based. Now,
it's definitely not, and it does. I feel it does come down to money and control, in a way of, if it was recognized, how would they deal with it? It's very challenging, but it needs recognition, because it's got to be one of the most controversial illnesses out there. So yeah. So for those of you that are a patient in Australia and having any struggles at all, please know that we deeply understand, and we're not quitting. We're going for justice in partnership with people like Amina. So, and another thing that frustrates me is that when patients get a positive for a Borrelia test in Australia, they're being told it's a false positive because we haven't identified Borrelia in Australian tick. Now, there's other diseases for which actual causality hasn't been determined, but they still aren't denied medical care. Do you have any thoughts on that? And how does it feel to be treating Australians in a situation like that? Oh, look, yeah, exactly. I think if at the end of the day, sometimes doctors are happy to, or medical practitioners, to put a label on something. So, for example, like lupus or MS or fibromyalgia and those things, it's like, yes, that person now has that diagnosis, and that can be treated accordingly with the medical sort of pharmaceutical way. I think that when when we're getting a wishy-washy diagnosis and people are turned away and they've been told that there's nothing wrong with them, when even, of course, we know the basic blood tests are all going to come back fine, because this person, their organs are still functioning, their liver's still working well, and their electrolytes of their kidneys still functioning. So that's great, but they're not looking at the whole picture. And even something like lupus is very hard to diagnose. They're looking at just a certain few immune system markers that may indicate, and they may have a few symptoms. So I just think, look, it is a very broad spectrum type illness, because it is multi-symptom affected. And I think we've just got to really look at the person individually and work out how it is affecting them. Does that answer the question?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, the reason I'm focusing on this a little bit at the beginning, because it's really important to validate people, and it often helps patients' families to understand what their loved one is up against, because sometimes it's like a, dichotomy. It's enough to make you crazy, saying, how could this even be true? So another thing I wanted to touch on is that when I've worked and spoken with international practitioners, they tell me that Australian Lyme patients are some of the sickest that they treat. Do you have what's your experience, Amina?
Yeah, I do see that, definitely. And the sad thing is that it's often left so long, and the person just gets worse and worse, and it's affecting their adrenals. They're making them really tired. The inflammation becomes so much because it's not being dealt with, and then it is affecting other systems. And the thing is, of like bacteria like Borrelia, they will trigger and escalate whatever is going on in that person's body from an inflammatory and genetic perspective. So whatever this person may be genetically susceptible to, if the Lyme and the borreliosis and the other stealth pathogens are not dealt with appropriately, and also the whole detoxing of the Borrelia, so we're not getting the endotoxins affecting the brain and so forth. If the body's not dealing with it properly, it's going to go into a high inflammatory state, a high toxic state, that further then will trip that autoimmune system switch on, literally. So then they are going to start getting the symptoms of all the other things that they're genetically susceptible to, be it skin rashes, be it brain fog, be it and that's also an inflammatory thing, but the actual things like eczema, dermatitis, rashes, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus type symptoms, MS type symptoms, diabetes, whatever it is that can then cascade and become more of a problem. So this is the thing, it needs to be treated ASAP really effectively, and then the treatment needs to be ongoing. So it's not just, of course, we know a couple of weeks of doxy is not going to deal with it. So, but we need a complete integrated program where the patient is monitored, and it does take time because it's such an intense infection.
It is, isn't it? And in your experience, can natural medicine be enough for a full recovery?
I do believe it can be, yes, but it depends on the patient, the diligence of the patient, the diligence and the support of the practitioner. Because often in chronic cases, the antibiotics might not be enough, and it might have been left a little bit too late. So it depends. Some patients react well with them and others don't. In acute Lyme, like someone has just been bitten by a tick and they've got the rash, and obviously they don't all get the rash, but if there are the symptoms, it might not even be borreliosis, it might be rickettsia or Bartonella, anything. But in that case, I would definitely recommend antibiotics just ASAP, together with the herbs and the detox and the vitamin C and all the other support. And I do personally believe that naturopathy on its own can help, but it's got to be the whole diet, the nutrition, the person's mental state, and I guess attitude really can actually have a massive impact. And it's challenging, and it's easy to say, be positive and know you can get better, but it does take, that's where the support of the practitioner, family members, association members, friends, whoever you have to and just it's like an ongoing, even counseling to a certain perspective, to keep up that motivation, so that if you know you're getting better and your body knows it's getting better, it's like on a cellular level, you can get better, but it's challenging. It needs an ongoing, it's like climbing a mountain, and you might slip down sometimes and fall down and all of those things. You might fall backwards a few feet. Just got to get up and keep going. So yeah, I think that it can be helped.
Yeah. And there's often so much neuroinflammation that sometimes ensues in depression or confusion, or in me, it's like dementia. That's must be, as a practitioner, like, I don't know, it's like holding a hotcake, really trying to get these people to help themselves, really.
Oh, it is. But I mean, I love that. I love that, looking at it all. I have these they look very messy, but these sort of jigsaws that I put together, and I literally, every single patient, I have hundreds and hundreds of them. Every single patient has these jigsaws that we just sort of put together and look at all the information of what may be going on. So I look at the genetics of what they're susceptible to and what may have been switched on, the history of, what else, sometimes people haven't even been bitten by a tick, and it may be from mother via utero or something like that, or from blood, being given blood or whatever, or they may not know. But looking at all the nutritional deficiencies, looking at how well the liver is detoxing, of the, drinking enough fluid, and then the state of the adrenal glands, because if that person has had a past history of a lot of stress and anxiety, then that person is more susceptible to more of that, which can sort of, it's like a vicious cycle. So even things like that, everything has to be looked at. Of course, other factors like with the genetics, we check the mold type genes, and looking at, are they exposed to mold? Are they exposed to other chemicals that can further, just interfere with the healing process? So all of these things have to be looked at. Hormonal imbalances, medications they're on, so many things. So I like to put it all together, and whatever is going on for that person with a chronic illness at that time, I like to be mindful of all the triggers and let the patient know, like, let's have a look at what are your triggers, so we can avoid them and we can work on that, so we're not going to get flare-ups as often, or when we do, then we can deal with it and know. And a lot of it comes down to inflammation. That's, like, I think the big elephant in the room is that, because like you talked about the brain fog and dementia, I mean, we know that when there's a kill-off, die-off of bacteria, when someone's herxing, if it's not dealt with properly, those dead endotoxins or lipopolysaccharides can actually cross the gut wall into the bloodstream and cross the blood-brain barrier and cause a lot of inflammation. So there's certain markers like TNF alpha or MMP9 that we know they're inflammatory markers that can affect and cause inflammation of the brain, temporary inflammation of the hippocampus, which affects short-term memory. And then you can have, like, things like turmeric and boswellia have been clinically proven to actually reduce those inflammation markers. So there are ways of dealing with it. It's just, I like to find as much information as possible so we can do inflammatory marker tests and so forth, whatever the patient is needing, because there's everyone's has a different picture. Yeah. I think that sort of covers that question. Was that
perfect? And because my question was, what's your approach to starting to assist these really complex? Yeah, it does, doesn't it? No, awesome.
Yeah.
So the thing that I wanted to touch on, that in quite a chronic state, and by then sometimes they're also financially wiped out. So obviously everybody's ideal scene would be have someone like you to them this journey. But what patients to help themselves?
To help themselves, the most important thing would be to try and reduce the inflammation and have the body as relaxed as possible. And so things like, obviously, getting enough sleep. It comes down to quite basic things. Having enough sleep. If sleep is a problem, then make sure whatever the ways you can get to sleep naturally, if preferably, but sleep is a big one. Making sure they have enough water, because a lot of people get dehydrated because they don't, when you have these chronic stealth infections, often you don't have a thirst. So things sort of get, so you need to make sure you're having lots. I love lemon juice in water was alkalizing. So the body needs to be alkalized, because if you have an acidic type environment, that's bacteria love that. So we want to make sure nice and fresh. Sometimes apple cider vinegar, a teaspoon in a glass of water can help. I'm very big on the diet. I prefer people to be generally gluten-free, dairy-free. And that's really because the, can you still hear me? I just sort of, my computer logged off. Yeah.
We'll just let people know. Apologies for if we're having any internet issues, because both of us are in regional areas. It's on a prayer that we're here to.
The internet in Australia is shit, as well as some of the medical perspectives. So yes, so definitely a diet, because we know, I mean, that's a whole nother lecture, but things like gluten and sugar and alcohol and in some cases caffeine, if you have those types of CYP1A2 genes, and dairy can cause inflammation. So it's not massively helping, and they're not things that are needed. So plenty of vegetables, at least 5 different veggies a day, a couple of maximum 2 fruits, because some people eat too much sugar in that way. And I really think that not pushing self, like if you're working and you're still pushing yourself, that day you might feel you've got a bit of energy, you can go out there and do it, but you're going to suffer for it 2 or 3 days later. So it's really a case of being kind to self, pacing self. It's a great way of, an awful way to have to go for it, but it is a great way to suddenly go, okay, I really need to look after myself now and put myself first, say no to what you can't do. And it's tough, because the emotional side of things are people not understanding, because most of these types of people they look great, they look fine, they look healthy, there's nothing wrong, the bloods are fine, doctor said you're fine, so it's very, very hard. So that mental thing, I think if you can, probably that's one of the biggest areas, is to work on that and just go, what, I'm not, people aren't understanding, or but that's part of it. You've just got to rise above it, because you can't make everyone understand and acknowledge and get it. The people that are on the same level and have the same energy and understand, or they'll get it. But that's the biggest thing, I think, is just the emotional support. So just get that wherever you can, because I think it's because you need every day to have a bit of a spirit to get up and keep going. That's the thing. So if you're and do things, this is a really important thing, is to keep doing things that you love. It doesn't have to be physical exercise or running around doing stuff, but just be it reading nice books, or listening to nice audios if reading is challenging, or getting out, doing a little bit of weeding in the garden, or whatever your abilities are, as long as it's not too much, or listening to nice music, maybe doing some artwork, or whatever you can do, whatever your ability is, to still keep doing the things you love and have a goal, like not just health goals, but just still have that. You just got to keep going.
And so I know your book is something that you set out to help people, to give them guidance. Do you have any recommendations on how they should use it?
It can actually just be used as a flicker, just randomly. There's a whole section on the herbs that I use, and why I use them. And there's no specific treatment. I don't do a protocol. It's just not like that. And because everyone's different and everyone has different needs. So it's just, in my book, I talk a little bit about, digestive health, which of course 80% of the immune system is in the gut. So I do a lot of microbiome testing, which I actually find very helpful, because it gives a lot more ideas and a bit more specific tools that I can use. Because if that gut is not, if you don't have a good amount of good bacteria and too much toxic bacteria or parasites, that can really have an impact on how well you're healing. So there's a little bit about that, and how to detox properly, and always we need to be making sure the liver is getting rid of toxins, and that's not just toxins from dead bacteria, but anything, mold, food, chemicals, the pollution, air we breathe. And just some people read it back to front, from front to back sort of thing, whatever, or you can just flick through certain areas and read a little bit about a herb. It's just putting it together of what we need to be covering, really.
Awesome. And so what would you say to families who are confused about this whole process and facing, the denial of diagnosis and care? Is there any way that you can help them, feel strong and empowered to really support their loved one?
I think with families, it's helpful and important to know that sometimes patients start feeling better, and no patient wants to be sick. No patient wants to be in pain and so tired that they can't get up and even have to make a choice whether they have a shower or have something for lunch. That's, no one wants to be like that. So it's the thing is, because they often do look okay, and a doctor might say, yeah, no, everything's fine, and be in denial of that Lyme exists in this country. It is here, and people have very real symptoms. And if someone's in pain, you can't see it. And they may have days where they feel good and they're like, oh yeah, I feel good today. And they go out on a family trip, or they do some shopping, or mow the lawn, or whatever. But if they push themselves, they will feel it a couple of days later, and they'll be that the energy the adrenal needs to get going, and their body goes in that little fight or flight response, even though it's exciting. And then the inflammatory markers will kick in, and then they'll end up in pain or more tired. So I think for families, it's really important and beneficial to know that these patients do have up and down days. And there are some days when they can't even lift their head off the pillow, and they feel really ill and they're in pain everywhere. And then there's other days where, yeah, they can do it. And it's all about hormones, the inflammatory state, all sorts of different cycles, plus the cycles of the Borrelia seems to flare up every 4 weeks, Bartonella every couple of weeks, Babesia every 3 to 8 days, bloody blastocystosis every 10 days. We don't know what's going on. They're all at different cycles. So, and full moon and things does seem to flare things up with animals, humans, and everything. So hormonal cycles as well will be playing a role in men and women. So there are all these things. So we can't say, oh, well, you're okay now, you're fine, you should be getting better now. But I do appreciate how challenging it is to be looking after someone who is chronically ill. It's very, very challenging. So I really take my hat off to any of you that are doing it, because it's a beautiful thing to be doing. And it's that service, it's really, really caring and loving to be able to do it. And it is a challenge for sure.
Yeah. And your family member deserves your support, and is lucky to have them if you're watching this. So thank you so very much.
100%.
So, yeah. And Amina, what are your thoughts and advice on the priorities? What would your dream wish list be for this priority solutions in Australia?
I would love, I have a little tick box in my freezer full of about 150 ticks that I've pulled off myself and my dog and my kids just in this space in Quran. I would love it to have a lab that we can just take those ticks and go, yep, you can test those, and oh, look at all the different types of Borrelia we have in them. That would be my ideal fantasy, and that's why I'm keeping my tick box. So anyone can help me out there, that'd be really good. So would be just to have that open-mindedness that, yes, of course, yes, someone has been bitten by a tick. Clearly there's an immune reaction. I had one myself just a couple of weeks ago, worst I've ever had. My glands swelled up. It was excruciating. I took all my herbs, and I actually had a few days of antibiotics, which I don't very rarely do, but I did, because I was like, ooh, don't like this one. So my actual my big dream would be that we could see, yes, we know, and be mindful 100% that of course any of these ticks or all other vectors have a whole plethora of different types of bacteria, for sure, and viruses. There was a study on penguins of Phillip Island a couple of years ago looking at they found 21 different viruses in the ticks that were affecting the penguins, but they said, oh, these viruses won't affect humans. Well, how do we know that? We don't know that. We actually die with 5% more DNA in us just from viruses. Viruses are part of of evolution. They change us on a cellular, so we know this with the current situation. But so we need to be mindful and obviously open to the fact that these vectors will be transferring their bacterial infections into us. And for sure, when we know that Borrelia is in Australia, that's been proven a few times, it's just been ignored. That's the problem. So that would be my thing, would be just to be more open-minded and just accept it, so we can actually have proper treatment programs for people that are individual and deal with their symptoms, so that they don't get as bad. They're able to be helped a lot sooner without years of suffering, which is just really unnecessary. So
I like that vision, Amina. I really like that vision.
I'd
And
also love the vision as well of actually having a medical system that's a lot more integrated, instead of pushing naturopaths off and taking us off private health insurance and dissing all the stuff that we're doing, to be a lot more accepted and understanding that we can actually really work together in such a way. And I do have hope here. I think that there is a definite shift towards that here, which is really, and we've got a lot of awesome naturopaths that are really, like really on board and really sort of pushing to get this integrated way happening, and to sort of, just improve medical general. Yeah.
I was a critical care nurse for almost 20 years, and I 100%, 200% know that integrative medicine is the only way for best practice in healthcare for human beings and all living beings. Really, it needs an integrative approach. And,
Absolutely.
And you guys are warriors for pushing through this kind of situation. So, Amina, I just wanted, I'm not sure if I missed any questions for you, but there's two questions I have left. Number one, if somebody wanted to connect with you, and either for a consultation and get your book, how do they do that?
You can go on my website. I've got two websites, amina.com.au, which you can book online for Skypes or phone consultations. I work in Noosa on a Tuesday, so at Noosa Holistic Health. So you can book through the Noosa Holistic Health website if you want to see me in person. Most of my patients are Skype online, and then I can post out herbs, but if someone's not close by or I get people who will travel just to meet me for the first time. My book can be bought on my website. That's www.limenatural.com. Or just text me and I can, post one out. So whatever works, really. Yeah.
Awesome. And so to finish today, what would you like to leave from your heart for current and future Australians and families impacted by Lyme and other vector-borne disease?
I think it's a big one, but I think just know that definitely you can get better. 100% you can get better. It's just, you've got to just have the right team that are supportive, and that team can be family, friends, be it counselors, medical doctor, the Lyme Association, any support groups you can. So get your team together and don't be afraid to ask for help. And if you don't get it from the places that you expect it, that's okay. We just have to look further afield. Sometimes these things happen, the horrible things can happen to make us go, okay, I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to look at this. And I think sometimes there's a whole nother, even a spiritual level going on, where we have to just sort of think, okay, this is happening. What do I need to do now? Because things are out of your control in one way, that you've got to this state of illness, but you can get better. There are definitely things. So don't give up, because I think even though it's a very controversial thing, there's so many things that can still be worked on. And it doesn't, you don't have to have the label or the specific diagnosis. It's very hard to diagnose a lot of these chronic stealth pathogens anyway. I've had patients that, maybe they don't have borreliosis, but there'll be other things going on, a lot of the viral things, or, other underlying pathogens in their gut and so forth. So whatever it is, it's just, you just want to get onto the best treatment plan in an integrated way, get your team together, eat well, and this is a whole program, and it will change your life for the better in the long run. It can. It doesn't have to be, this is the end. It's not. You can do it. People have cancer and they get over it, and sadly, I know some people don't, but you can get through this. And if it's meant to be, you just have to trust that this is what's going on, and you just do the absolute best and make the best out of it.
Yeah, and keep fighting. Amina, God bless you. Thank you so much for being here with us today, and I know this will make a difference.
Thank you. I'm honored. Thank you.